This is Phil McNally with the Artspeak, and we are talking today with, hopefully I get your last name correct, Becky Sciullo?
Shulo.
Sciullo. Sciullo. Uh, Becky is a marketing analyst, and she basically talks with other artists from a marketing standpoint and helps other artists from consulting. And she's going to get into a lot of this as we go on in this podcast. But I've known Becky probably for under a year, definitely about a few months, in fact. And we've discussed many things on her side, which was very interesting to me as an artist. As far as, oh gosh, it would be she knows something I don't. And I think most artists have this problem, and it's from um, knowing how to market, knowing where to market, knowing when to market. And these are things that I've always had issues with as far as from a social media side or just a consulting side. And Becky happens to be one of those who actually does it well. So she has informed me
Nice.
of a lot of things and kept me going. And I've kind of went along with her and kind of looked at her site and what she does. And I think she's very interesting. So welcome aboard, Becky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. What I'd like to do is give you the floor a little bit and just let you kind of talk from your side as far as what you call artisan advantage and what that is and how it came to be. So you got it.
Okay, so Artisan Advantage is the name of my website, actually, where I post all about what I do and information for artists. And I guess I would always say it started as an experiment because my father's an artist. So I'm not an artist. I always like to make that really clear. I really can't even do stick figures. So and it's interesting because in my family, you can definitely see with my father, a nephew, actually my brother, although he doesn't really do any art, but when he was a kid, you can just see that there's some kind of genetic trait there that lends itself for people in my family, but I didn't get any of that. So my background is marketing and communications. My education in communications was all done pre like internet. So I graduated from college in 90. So that was right before really students I was a advertising major actually at Penn State in communication in the communication school. And we did storyboards, like
Mm.
we drew them out, we handed in paper, copywriting, press releases. And, it wasn't too long after I graduated that the whole world changed. So I understood marketing concepts, copywriting concepts, PR, but I didn't know the technology. So the blogging and all that was really fascinating to me about how that worked and all these things that were happening. So I was sort of paying attention to that. And when I was growing up, he was always painting. He paints in watercolor and now watercolor and mixed media. But at the time, he was always doing watercolor, but it was a hobby. He would exhibit his work as part of I'm in Pittsburgh. So he was in Pittsburgh at the time, the Pittsburgh Watercolor Society, group type events. And I just, as a kid, I'm just kind of watching it from the periphery, right? Thinking, oh yeah, my dad does art, but I didn't really think too much about it. So that was a hobby for him. And then when I was, let's see, it was probably about 2007 or 8, he retired from his full-time career and he really started painting a lot. And I, at that time, was taking a break from my job because I had a small toddler who I was staying home with. And, but, my brain was like, I liked working, so I'm like, what could I do? And I was sort of at the time, like, reading about blogging and online marketing, but he's painting all this art. And at the time, he happened to be painting all these bluegrass musicians because he's always painted what he's into at that moment in his life. So you can actually look through his life Oh, that's when dad was really into fly fishing. That's when he was really, and he sort of had all these hobbies and interests. He's kind of like we've always teased him, he's sort of like this Renaissance man that's just deep dives into all these different things. So bluegrass musicians, he's painting them. And my mother said, hey, this is like, I don't know what to do with this. And these things are piling up in the basement. What do you think? What do you think about selling this? Now, my mom also has a business brain. She was a very successful real estate agent. So she's thinking, what can we do with these? And I said, I don't know. Let me think about it. So I took a class at our community college online, how to build a website. And I built a website on Front Page. You probably, I don't know if you remember Front
Yeah,
Page.
yeah.
Okay. So it was
Remember
like,
those?
yeah, really outdated. I had like a box program I had to load into my computer, or a little disk or something, and built this website. And so I found these bluegrass blogs out. And actually, my father was reading them because he was so into bluegrass music as well as his art. So we wrote press releases, or one press release, actually, one very effective press release about his work, and sent it to these blogs with a link back to his site. And like I said, that was the experiment. Let's see what happens. And within 24 hours, we had I forget the name of the program at the time, but something where you could see how many people were hitting your site.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember the name of what we were using, but within 24 hours, he had 1,000 visitors and one sale of, I think we were selling prints, originals. We didn't even have the prints made. It was just like, we had someone that could make them, but quickly for us, but so we sold the one, and I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. I always like to tell people that, and to encourage artists to say, I did not have any contacts in the art world. So I didn't have any galleries I could go to. I didn't have anybody I could say, hey, look at this artwork. I had to kind of come up with an idea and think
Mm-hmm.
about like, who would be literally interested in buying this, and just go to them versus worrying about like finding galleries and everything. So that was sort of how I approached it. The way I got interested in thinking, okay, maybe I could do this like on a scale for more artists, is when people were asking me to help them. And so there were a couple artists that I sat down with and helped them, I think at the time, either like come up with a website or blog. And so that's how it started. That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry. I wasn't,
That's
but
good. No, but there was no conventional uh the practical way that you did things as far as what they do nowadays. I mean, you're kind of in a, I see it kind of being in a zone that you have to do the building blocks, and this is the building blocks, and you go this way. But I think what you're talking about is an age related scenario that, based upon being back then, which I was too.
right,
I mean, things were not established. I mean, it
right,
just wasn't so on key, say, okay, go do this, go do that. And you had
right,
thousands of people on YouTube or wherever saying, this is the tutorial of how you do that,
right,
you know.
right. No, you didn't have that. And yeah, I mean, we didn't even use social media. It was all just website, blog, direct to people. And the but so we were stumbling along, but we were having success. But during that time, like over the course of, I would say, like probably 5 years, I did come up with a system for him that I didn't even realize at the time I was putting this system together.
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, when I went and I was really thinking, okay, I need to start helping artists. Like, I want to do this. I want to put on some type of program. And I looked at what we were doing. I was like, I have really been doing now the same thing. Like, I didn't even realize I had a system, but I had one. So looking at that, I was able to say, okay, well, not everybody is a artist painting bluegrass musicians and that can just go find a bunch of people that like bluegrass music. I mean, that's not always the case, right?
Mhm.
So how can I teach this in a way that makes sense, that any artist could take this structure and set this structure up for themselves and use like the principles to build their business versus, how could I share that and present that? And really came up with, I think what I believe when I share it is a system that any artist can use. And again, it's a framework of organizing yourself and sort of hitting these certain parameters so that your business moves forward. And then once you have that set up, you basically customize it for your work and what you're
Mhm.
creating,
Mhm.
and figure out, okay, what makes sense not only for what I'm creating, but for what kind of business that I want to have. Because there's all different kinds of art, businesses. There's all kinds of different ways you can make money with your art. And so it's really also a matter of what do you want to do? Like some artists want to do commission work, some artists hate commissions, so you have to really think about those things.
So you kind of, if I'm understanding you right, you've kind of built a foundation that
Mhm.
you can build a house on, and that house could be a one-story house, a two-story house, or a friggin' 50-story building, but that foundation is what holds it up, and you're allowing them to customize it, I guess, in a way to where it fits for them.
Yeah, so it's the house analogy actually is a good one. The way I present it when I'm teaching it is as a wheel. So the hub is the web presence in the center, because
Hmm.
everybody needs to have a solid space on the internet I want them to control it generally. So your own website where all of your information is housed, where you can tell your story and have your message there and show your work. Everything's in the hub. And then on the outer rim, we would have the audience. So that's where you're thinking, okay, who are the people or companies or whoever it would may be that are going to want what I'm doing? Who are going to be likely, so that you can at least give yourself, a lane to work with. So you're not all
Hmm.
over the place.
Right.
So let's think about who those people might be. And then your spokes are your channels. So how do you get the message on that hub out to that audience, or how does that audience find your hub? So the
Mhm.
spokes are all those things that we use, like social media and email marketing or sending a press release, or I still use from time to time direct mail, depending on what we're doing. So that system, and I always like to think of it as a wheel, because doing those things consistently, so sending those messages out consistently and the back and forth of those spokes over time moves the business forward. Like it literally is moving it forward. So you set that framework up, and this doesn't happen overnight. It takes some, thinking about what it is you want to do, what it is you're creating. And I like for artists to create what they want to create, not, I always say, don't find an audience and then think you're going to create for the audience. You should be doing what is true and authentic to yourself,
Mhm.
and then think about who your audience might be. And sometimes you might not hit it on the first try, right? Like there's some trial and experimentation involved. But over time, you start to see patterns, and you might have more than one audience, but you're going to see patterns of what's working and what's not working. And you generally want to repeat what's working, build on that. Don't keep doing what's not working, or figure out why it's not working and can you improve upon it. And, not everything's going to work. So you stop doing that, but keep doing what's working. And so that's the framework, the wheel, really. That's how I like to look at it. And then once you're more secure in understanding and where you want to go with your business. So if you can tell me, I want to, okay, for example, I have an artist who She wants her work to be shown in museums and exhibitions. She does a specialty type of digital art. It's science related. And for her, it's not as much about the money as it is about sharing what she's doing. She doesn't care to be selling it on large scale, at a large scale, or making a ton of prints or anything with this work. She really, truly wants it to be seen and share it and get feedback about what she's doing. So knowing that her audience is or museums, specialty museums, and we crafted a whole campaign to go out and get shows lined up and start to connect with people in this very defined niche that would be interested in what she's doing.
I want to stop you there because that's an interesting point. Somebody who wants to show in a museum. I mean, I never thought about this, but is just wondering, is that a hard venue to get into? I mean, I get galleries. You can just go into galleries, and galleries are one thing, but a museum, I mean, that's a
Okay.
kind of bigger time, isn't it?
So it depends. If we're talking about an art museum, yes. And you're probably going to need to have an MFA or some kind of credentialed history showing, why you're established enough that you should be shown in an art museum. But in some cases, if your work relates to something that's going on in that venue, then it depends. But that is what I like to call a unique strategy. So,
and this is where you come in. So you got a person, an artist who comes in and says, "Oh, my dream would be let's do this."
yeah.
And then you come in and say, "Well, that dream may turn into a nightmare, or it may not exist,
It's not
or
practical where you are in
right."
this position. But in her case, it was a unique fit. Is it common? No. But she's now at a point where, like I said, for this particular client, it's been interesting for me because my brain is always wired sell, 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 right? Like most people hire me, they want to see financial reward. They're not paying me. Most people want to see some kind of financial goal or financial revenue stream built up.
But this person isn't.
In
The
this
person you're
case,
talking
it's
about.
interesting. So it was hard for me to kind of rewire myself because I would come up with ideas like, well, let's do this or that. Well, and I have to remember it's her plan. And she not that she doesn't want to make money. I mean, she obviously, to recoup her expenses, we are asking for some payment from these places for exhibition fees and whatnot to cover. She doesn't want to lose money, but it wasn't her primary goal. So she doesn't want to go do a festival or a trade show. Like, she's been invited to do some things and it's just like, well, yeah, you could sell a ton of art there, but she doesn't want to do that. So I had to rewire myself a little bit for that. But it's interesting now because I just took on another client, totally different work situation, but kind of a similar thing where he's got a whole body of work. He's not creating it anymore, but he was very accomplished and is now doing a book about his work and some creativity. So we are mapping out a plan of attack for him to also have exhibitions around this work. Now, he was at one time he was selling his work, but now he's winding down from that. And this collection, it's not really a selling situation. It's more of just the exhibition for the quality of the work and wanting people to come in and see the scope of what he's done over time. But again, it's kind of interesting that the work that I did for her sort of laid the groundwork, just like what you're doing with a podcast.
Right.
Sometimes things just fall into place. I tend to find now I'm finding these, I'll call them like special project type clients where it's sort of really out of the box kind of different stuff. But the framework, getting back to the wheel, really, for everybody that I work with, I do, sometimes they don't always want to do every part of it, but in the end, I really try to get them to round out that wheel. I always say you don't have to do every spoke, what you don't have to do every single marketing thing that's out there, but you need to figure out what fits for what you want to do and what makes sense for your business, and then focus on those things. So once they set that up, but for most artists, I would say you set that wheel up. Where I come in is I'm not a website expert. I can look at an artist website and say, okay, you need to add this, clean this up. I'd like to see more of something here or there, and point out, nuances as well as like practicalities about the site and how it might work better for them. I can point them in directions, like I know where to go to get help for things, but I'm not a web designer. And I did my own website, but I struggle with it. I wouldn't put myself off as a web designer. But I can look at their wheel and their system and say, okay, you're weak here. We got to boost this up. You're doing good here. So I kind of do an overall look at everything, and then give them like solid written, here's your list, like go do this stuff, and you'll be in a better position with that system. So that's kind of like part one. And then once that's all done, I think where my strength is helping them with what I call, and actually I have a new program I'm doing in October for an arts organization, but it's based on strategies and tactics, I like to call it. So once you have your wheels set up, you have your system, you have a good vision about what you want to do with your art and where you want to go, what you want your business to look like. At that point, you sit down and you come up with strategies of how are you going to get from point A to point B. And once you come up and then you get the strategy, then the tactics are like, okay, what are all the different activities that are going to feed the strategy? So I really like to do that kind of work. And so maybe that's where my creative brain, or I didn't get the art talent, but I feel like something in my brain is good at coming up with different ideas on how to do that, I guess.
Well, you kind of said it. I mean, you're doing it from definitely the marketing experience, and but you're hitting on artists, and as kind of the bailiwick as far as how your feed is. And it's almost, I was writing down here, it says you almost remind me of a of a car mechanic. Well, let's look under the hood. Let's see how that looks. Oh, and this, go sit in the waiting room for a while, and you're in the waiting room, and this mechanic is just
Yeah.
all over the inside of your engine. And it says, oh yeah, this has got a leak. Oh, we need to fix that, and we need to fix that. And then he walks back in the door of the waiting room, and you get up and say, okay, what you find? It's almost like a doctor too. What you find? And then he's got this list, and and you're sitting there. Oh, wow, I didn't know I had. Oh, geez, Oh God, I need that. Oh, gee, how much is this going to cost?
Right.
Kind of a thing. And I'm just like, okay, that's going to cost a lot of money, or that's not going to cost
Right.
much, or hey, get it fixed for free. And that's how I kind of see this. I mean, you are kind of like an overseer. I mean, somebody comes in with a wish list and says, I'm an artist. Hey, I don't know anything. In other words, I'm not the high end artist that you were talking about from the museum side. I am a very low end artist. I'm basically hobby in it. And all of a sudden, I got this itch. I Can I get into a business, and can I sell this, or can I show it? And how would you go about that? You're part of that team that would help define that.
Yeah, so I mean, I do something called an art business review where that's exactly what you said. Like I get all the information that I can from them and then I put together, okay, this is kind of where I see things and here's what I would do if I were you and give them a list. But I do try to, and that's just like a finite, you hire me for that service. There's some follow-up involved. But from that after that service, like they can just take that and run with it and do everything themselves, or
Mhm.
I can help along the way. It's completely up to the artist. I think that really, I do think what I can do best is just like take that look, point them in the right direction, give them some advice. In most cases, that work can be done by the artist themselves at that
Mhm.
point. But it does help to get the list. Like I've now saved them the consternation and the time with that list and written assessment of here's some ideas, here's how this could play out for you. Um, but I don't want them to get overwhelmed. So I then try to do a little bit of a coaching piece about the time management and
Mhm.
how to not, as an artist, get, because if you get overwhelmed, you'll just stop, and then you just won't go, like, and I've seen that happen. I want them to put it into their routine so that they chunk off little bits at a time. And that's a really big component to success, like doing, instead of trying to like do it as a weekend project, you can do your stuff. And it's very hard to sit down on a Saturday and think you're going to do all your marketing for the week or the month,
Mhm.
because you have to remember, okay, where did I leave off? And
Mhm.
what's my
Mhm.
password? And what's my, it's like, it would
Mhm.
take me like an hour just to
To get
get
caught up.
get
Yeah.
caught up.
Yeah.
But if you do it every day or 5 days a week and you give yourself little goals and you do every day a little bit towards that goal, you'll find that you really get into a groove, you get into a rhythm, and you actually like accomplish something. So I like to, once they have that plan, sort of give them like a chunked out, okay, this is how I would do it, like on a timeline, so that they're not overwhelmed. And so, yeah,
That
so
that's
that's,
that's that's really good. I mean, I like that because from a timeline perspective, I see you as more of an inspirationalist because I mean, an artist come in with a big question mark across the head. Say, how do I market? I don't market. I do art, and that's all I do. So you coming in as a person. Here's your list, and then I could see them seeing a list, especially in my case too. I could see a list and say, oh, okay. And I'll get 1 through 3 out of 10 done. And then that's it. I can't do anymore. It's just like, but if you give them a timeline, take out a chunk, say, let's just work on this and move forward. That's a motivational piece.
yeah,
I mean, as far as to keep them going, because artists, I mean, if they get inspired, such as, oh, I see this reference shot of a photograph, or I'm outside and I say, oh man, this is a great plein air, but the sun is going across and I've got to get this done in less than 5-10 minutes, and I want to see a good result. Otherwise, they lose. I mean, they just let it go. But you seem to be saying, okay, we're going to keep this going, but you got to keep it going in a structure that we don't lose pace, we don't lose success, we keep it moving.
right.
Where artists, I don't think they're all clued in like I am to say, okay, what's today? Do I go off and market or do I go off in art? And I
Yeah.
say, I'm going to do art. So it's like, okay, markets to the side. Okay, that's it. But if you do it in little pieces
Yeah.
that you see success after time, I could see where you get. I've actually heard people get to where they enjoy it. They see the results and say, okay, I'm in a kind of a groove, and I kind of like want to do it again. I want to keep on doing it, and it's like it becomes a habit. And I think that's where the gold piece is that if this becomes a habit to where the whole day is not a piece of art, but the whole day is what makes up a piece of art, which is doing the painting, doing the marketing, doing this and doing that.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of artists aren't in that headspace.
Yes. And it's, well, it is probably, and I mean, I think even just from experience, and then the really cool thing that I get I mean, the system's fun, I mean, it's fine. You need it. You have to have it unless you're an extraordinary situation, you really need some kind of organized framework. But, what is really fun is then when you get into the proactive sharing of your work and making connections for your business, because that's under what I would call that strategy and tactics component, is really about forgetting about thinking that people are just going to find you and taking this proactive approach that you're going to go reach out, almost like a selling.
Mhm.
Artists don't want to sell like this, but it can be done in a way that is not like, a salesman. Not that there's anything wrong with salesmen, but
Not at all.
but can be, I know an artist doesn't want to, it's hard for artists most times to feel like they're maybe doing that.
Mhm.
But if you can proactively take some ownership about reaching out to the right people that it would make sense to communicate with, and not be afraid to do it, or even if you're afraid, just get yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit to take that step and do that on a repetitive basis, you will start to see things happen for your business. But once you have a solid product, then I can work with an artist.
That's great. That's great. And that's what I think the world needs more of. So anybody who is interested, this is Becky, and she's at artisan-advantage.com. And she'd be happy to even answer your questions or whatever. I'll keep some more blurb out there on this particular episode, and hopefully any of you artists who have any more questions can always consult and come to me or Becky, and we'll just be happy to answer them. So, Becky, thank you for
Sounds
being
good.
on. We
Thank you.
appreciate
This
it.
was fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I, and
Now I know it's just like having a conversation, right?
yes, it is. Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
Okay. All right.